me start, ladies and gentlemen, by thanking Andrew for his introduction. And thank you all for coming this afternoon. I would like also to thank all of the Gaming in Holland crew for organizing this wonderful event about an industry in transformation. Willem, where are you? You and your team did a really good job with this beautiful venue. So if you need a quote for a press release, here it is. Great venue, some fantastic discussions, and so far, some excellent speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we share the same aim to make it possible for consumers in the Netherlands to gamble safely and in a fair and attractive gambling market. One could say that we are on a journey together. Once or twice a year, we stop here at the Gaming in Holland event to talk about our business, about our experience along the way, and about our expectations. And then each of us continues its journey back to its business, and each with its own role and responsibilities. You operators, service providers, advisors, regulator, etc. And for all of us, during our journey, the law is our guide. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I enjoyed the briefing by Dennis and Frans on the secondary legislation. They are responsible for creating the law on remote gambling, which is an immensely important job. And with their briefing, we learned more about the upcoming parts of our journey. In this speech, I would first like to shed some light on the requirements and the procedure the Netherlands Gaming Authority will use when it comes to the licensing of remote gambling. And in the second part of my presentation, I will explain, where is it? Yeah, the elephant in the room. What is he doing there behind me? Ladies and gentlemen, on our journey, the bill for remote gambling is the milestone we wish to reach. The requirements for obtaining an online gambling license are based on the secondary legislation you've just explained, and which is attached to the bill. As I said, the law guides us. At this moment, I'm unable, however, to provide detailed information about the requirements and the procedure for obtaining an online gambling license, because we do not want to interfere or anticipate on the discussion in the Senate on the bill, nor do we want to anticipate on the discussions on the secondary legislation. But let me try to tell you in broad terms what the requirements and the procedure may look like if things go as proposed by the Ministry. So first, let me start with the license requirements. We share a common goal to strive for a fair and transparent license procedure that creates a level playing field and that ultimately offers consumers the opportunity to play safe and responsible. On the basis of the secondary legislation outlined by Dennis and Frans, the Netherlands Gaming Authority intends to focus the licensing requirements on 3 points. First, we need to know who is the applicant for an online gaming license. This comprises a check on elements from the secondary legislations. We've just learned about it, and it's especially with regarding the identity of the applicant, the transparency of the organization, the trustworthiness on different organization levels up to policymakers and the ultimate beneficial owner. And we also need to know the competence of the board and the staff and the financial stability of the applicant, those kind of things. Second, we need to know the business conduct of the applicant. This comprises a check with regard to the policies and the procedures of the applicant on several subjects, like the prevention of gambling addiction, like marketing and advertising, the identification and verification of participants, and on outsourcing, those kind of things. Third, we need to be assured that we can safely and effectively communicate with you digitally. And in this regard, we especially look at your ability to fulfill the obligations regarding the data safe and on the exclusion system crux. Our licensing requirements will overall reflect the core values of the Netherlands Gaming Authority, which places consumers first: credibility, legitimacy, transparency. This means that applicants must convince us that they will honor their commitments towards consumers. They have to convince us that they will protect consumers and that they will respect the law. And they have to convince us that they operate in a transparent manner. And I'm aware that the licensing process will be a tough period for those who apply. But let me assure you that the Netherlands Gaming Authority intends to travel this part of the road together with you. The Gaming Authority aims to be a strict regulator, you know that by now, in particular with regards to our role as a gatekeeper. One has to earn his license. But at the same time, we aim to have a fruitful and professional contact during the process. We believe that contact, exchange of information between the interested parties and the Gaming Authority is important in order to get all the technicalities right and to smoothen the licensing process. So this was about the licensing requirements. I will continue to explain in broad terms what the procedure might look like. With the procedure, we distinguish roughly 3 phases. And you should appreciate that the timing of these phases is dependent on the timing of the lower legislation and the political progress, of course. The first phase. About 2 months after the Ministry has finished the consultation of the secondary regulation, the Netherlands Gaming Authority will consult the license requirements and the licensing procedure. So I hope that that will be somewhere in the autumn. And at that moment, you will have the complete picture of what is needed to enter the Dutch market for remote gambling. During the consultation phase, we are happy to get your feedback, so we can further improve the requirements and the procedure. I'm looking forward to that discussion. And then we get to the second phase, and that already starts during the consultation phase. The Netherlands Gaming Authority plans to contact parties interested in an online gambling license. We will organize a few gatherings at which we will explain the technical and administrative details. And in addition, we plan to get in touch with some experienced parties to test the technical settings of the exclusion system and of the data safe. Our purpose is that the interaction with the parties and the exchange of information will help to get all the technicalities right and to smoothen the licensing process. And finally, in the third phase, the Netherlands Gaming Authority will process the formal application for an online gaming license. That's the moment we're all waiting for, of course. As you know, we aim to review the license applications within 6 months. And you also know that such a review will not automatically result in a license. From experience in other countries, we understand that the speed of the application process very much depends on the speed at which the applicant can produce the necessary documents. And for all those parties who are able to speedily produce all necessary documents, we intend to issue the licenses at the same time, the so-called Big Bang. So for now, this is what I wanted to share with you with regards to the requirements and the procedure for the licensing of remote gambling. I come now to the second part of the presentation. The first part dealt with the law. The second part deals with this elephant. You might wonder what the elephant behind me is doing in this room. Well, I've received several letters from different people here in the room about our press release announcing next steps in our enforcement policy. This press release to many different standards caused quite some noise. And in the aftermath of the reactions, I wondered why that was. Allow me to explain that the recent steps we've taken in our enforcement policy is no transformation, rather a logical consequence and follow-up of everything we have done in the past years. We are here to enforce the law. And according to Dutch law, the offering of unlicensed remote gambling in the Netherlands is illegal. And I'm sure that that's well known to you all. And on the journey into the Dutch gambling landscape, unlicensed operators are not allowed to target a gambling product to Dutch consumers. The public demands that the laws are enforced. And it's the task of the Netherlands Gaming Authority to curb illegal gambling operators that are focusing on the Dutch consumer. We've been communicating this for the past 5 years. When the Gaming Authority was installed, we defined our mission and our priorities. And we've been executing this mission in the past and the present, guided by the famous 3 priority criteria. You can all sing along: the Dutch language, the .nl websites, and advertising on radio, television, or in printed media. This does not mean, however, that offerings that do not prioritize on a particular moment are allowed whatsoever. We've always been clear that all unlicensed offerings targeted at Dutch consumers are illegal. So the priority criteria which we use to order our enforcement activities only mean that it might take longer before we enforce other offerings. Our approach with priority criteria has been successful. Operators have adjusted their websites to make them more difficult to find or have withdrawn completely. At the same time, it's clear that operators that do not prioritize have clear-cut offerings targeted at the Dutch consumers. As a consequence, the Dutch consumer is unable to separate the legal from the illegal provider, especially when a provider calls himself the best online casino of the Netherlands, or refers to typical Dutch symbols like the tulip bonus. Moreover, the Dutch consumer is led to believe he's dealing with a legal operator when he's able to pay with a typical Dutch online payment method. So, the Gaming Authority sees a lot of operators acting to the letter of the priority criteria, but not to its spirit. They are still trying to target the Dutch market, and that does not show trustworthiness or respect. And I've seen some of the reactions, and I know that some of you are unhappy with the decisions made, and that may be. And it could be that it's unavoidable, although I find it hard to accept, since the actions of a few are damaging the reputation and the future of the gambling industry as a whole. A good reputation of the gambling industry is a common interest. On a more positive note, the Gaming Authority also sees that some online operators have been compliant and have acted to the letter and the spirit of the criteria. This deserves much praise. They are just as interested in acquiring access to the Dutch market. However, they understand that ignoring the law or the well-being of consumers would not serve them or the industry in the future. These are our true allies. They understand that quick wins are not a business model. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm aware of the upset our press release caused in the industry. I would like to make it absolutely clear that our objective has always been to provide a safe environment for our consumers. And let me stress that the Gaming Authority is not suggesting that all online operators are cowboys and villains. No, the press release only stated that online operators should not target the Dutch market. So I ask online operators to remain patient for the remote gambling bill to come into force. It's up to the Senate to decide if and when that will be. And like many of you, in the interest of the Dutch consumer, I hope that this will be earlier rather than later. So to summarize this elephant, we've not changed our enforcement policy, and we've not changed the priority criteria. We've just taken the next step. The Gaming Authority is pressing ahead with its fight against illegal online gambling. Let me end my speech with some summary remarks. One could say that we are on a journey together in the Dutch gambling landscape. The law guides us. And many of us are looking forward to reach the milestone of the bill for remote gambling, but we have to be patient and let Parliament do its job. The Parliament and the Dutch society demands the Netherlands Gaming Authority to accompany you on your journey in order to safeguard a safe and fair gambling market. And perhaps some of you would like to travel without our company. But in fact, we are here. And I'm glad that we are in this together. Because there's one thing that I'm certain of, to make it possible for future consumers to gamble remote in a safe and fair setting, we all have to take our responsibilities. Players, operators, regulators, other organizations involved. I want to thank you for your attendance, and I'll be glad to take some questions. Thank you.
Question, please state your name and your company.
Thank you. Anthony Gavissa, Gavissa Law. I represent various operators in the industry. I think from our perspective, we're very pleased with any approach which tends towards protecting Dutch players. And you talk about the letter and spirit of the criteria, which certainly we agree with the spirit. I think the issues came about in perhaps the way that the authority released the press release and what it said, and more importantly, what it didn't say. We talk about a period of uncertainty until a regime is actually implemented in Holland, and we all know now that that could take quite some time. So the period that we're really interested in is this period where we need to know more clearly what can and what can't be done. And this is the issue, I think. I think that there were certain parts of the press release which just weren't clear enough. And we thought it would have been a good opportunity for the gambling authority to be very specific. And it seems to me that there was a lack of specificity. Certainly we understand the criteria in terms of not specifically targeting Dutch residents. That's quite clear in terms of the .nl, or anything which could be seen as being Dutch specific. I think the issues come in really relating to the rules relating to geo-blocking, which we find very confusing, and also relating to what you consider to be payment methods which are primarily used by Dutch residents. Thank you.
Okay, so you asked me, be more specific and give me some criteria. Well, I'm not going to give you. I'm going to ask you, like has been asked in the press release, to find ways which suit your company or the companies you advise not to target the Dutch consumer. And there are several ways one could realize this. One could change the website in Chinese, for instance. I'm just making a joke of it because there are more ways to get the job done. And it's up to you to find a way yourself how you're gonna realize the goal we all need, and that is not to address the Dutch consumer. I would like to keep it with that.
More questions? I'm sure there are. None? Yes, here we go.
Hi, Ian again. Hi. Just a question about the actual license. Will it be, like when you apply for a license, will you be able to have multiple sites running underneath a single license? Or is it just like one license per property, shall we say?
Yeah, well, this will be outlined in the secondary legislation, but it will be the latter. So one license for one site. Yeah.
Great, next question. Any more clarification from Marja? No further questions? Did I?
There's a question over there.
See, sorry.
David Altaner from Gambling Compliance. Just to take one more stab, can people stay in the Dutch market and still comply, or do they have to pull out until?
What do you mean by staying in the Dutch market?
Offer it within the Netherlands, within the border of Netherlands.
Okay, well, the Netherlands, of course, is well known for having international companies who do not target only at the Dutch consumers but at foreigners. So the location of their enterprise is not of interest for us. It's what is of interest is whether they do or do not target the Dutch consumer. So it's not where they are located, it's how they behave and what they result in. I'm not clear, I see how you face. Maybe you can specify your question then?
Does one have to stop offering gambling, online gambling to Dutch consumers?
That's what I asked them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought you asked about the location where the company was based. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. Yeah, I see.
Next question from this side. State your name.
Yeah, Marja Robichon, Bureau Brandeis. One question about the license application process. Is there going to be a means of exchanging questions? Because we've learned during the lottery license applications that questions always come up,
yeah.
And it's beneficial for both applicant and the gambling authority if it's possible to ask questions so things can move quicker.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked. It was a message I also tried to bring across during my presentation. Having professional and fruitful contact, both in the preparation of the licensing process and also during the license process, is something that we strive for. Because I agree with you, sometimes we are just not clear enough. We do our utmost best to be clear, but coming from different jurisdictions and different cultures, it is sometimes hard to interpret what we mean. So then we're always there to pick up the phone and answer your email. And likewise, in the preparation of the licensing process, we will organize gatherings. And also during the process, we will pick up the phone if we think that helps the process. Yeah.
Thank you. More questions from the room? We still have a few minutes before we break for lunch. Yes, I see.
Hi Marja, Chastain Fransen, Golfkats Fransen. What's the, could you give a description of a cowboy operator, as it has been qualified in Lower House, and a reputable operator, the sort of operator you were referring to in your presentation?
Yeah. Well, what I said in the presentation is that we are not saying that online operators are cowboys or villains, and I use those words because we were thought that we would think so. That's the only. I was replying to remarks that has been said about us, and we don't have a definition about a cowboy or a villain. It's just that these are words that are used. It's not a word that I will use.
Yes, but you also stated some moments ago that some operators have taken appropriate measures, which makes your authority sort of happy, I guess.
Ah, our allies.
Yes, your allies. Who are your allies?
I'm not going to mention names here because they're individual companies, and you don't want to say me about anything about an individual company, because then in the future it could be your company. Now, I'm just saying that there are companies that are clearly not targeting at the Dutch consumer right now, and they're using different ways to do that. Some say it in. I've given some examples in the press release. They either geo-block or stated in the terms that it's not for Dutch consumers, or if Dutch consumers give in their identification, they're stopped at that moment. So it could be in several ways. But I see those online companies at the gatherings like this here in the Netherlands. And I see those companies on the list of people mentioning to us that they are interested in the Dutch remote gambling market. So I know that they invest in entering the Dutch market, And I know that those companies are not accepting Dutch consumers at this moment. And that's why I call them my ally.
Yeah, let's be very straightforward here. Are you looking for a full blackout of the market?
Now, what I ask of the market is just as simple as I say. Don't target as Dutch consumer. And let me, as a metaphor, use the word that Dennis answered when there was a question, what do you mean by advertising targeted at minors? Well, there could be out of the streets some advertising that also a minor sees. But please don't target at them. So this is the same kind of answer.
So, sorry, it's a last remark here, but so essentially, if an operator would go on a .com environment and being, let's say, just merely passively available for Dutch nationals without having any specific, let's say, Dutch URLs or Dutch language websites, that would be sort of acceptable, I guess, right?
If you don't target at Dutch consumers, it's very acceptable.
That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you very much, Marja.
Okay.
Great. Any more questions before we go for a lunch? See any? Yes.
Hi, Marja. Martin Heijer from the European Gaming and Betting Association. I'm in the panel as well, so I only want you to answer one question that I have at this moment, which is when you set out why you are doing these enforcement measures, you very much had a legalistic point of view, applying the law, enforcing the law, and only really at the end the word consumers popped up, kind of an afterthought. It was almost. Can you just say how the measures that you're going to imply and impose are going to help consumers? Because if we assume that they will play online anyway, and you try to get out names that you know, what do you see as the risk that these consumers will go to websites that you have even less visibility on? And how will that help them for the coming period, maybe a year or a year and a half? So maybe from that perspective, could you say how this will help the consumer to some regulated offer?
Yeah, yeah. And indeed, I agree with you. It's all about the consumer. What we as you probably know, we've got a help desk. During working hours, consumers can phone us, and 24/7 they can email us. And what we get are, on the telephone and in the email at this moment for the last few years, are confused consumers. As I said in the presentation, they are not able to judge whether what they find online is legal or illegal. They're confused. When I go to gatherings of people who are addicted, for instance at AGOG, I get people who are addicted. So they play a lot, and even they don't know that it's illegal to play remote gambling in the Netherlands. So that is the problem that we are facing. And they say, well, I use this typically Dutch payment method, and the name of the site is in Dutch, and they mentioned all those things, and then I can always only say up to now, yeah, I know that there. I wish those offerings weren't there. So I'm helping those consumers. I'm helping them, or the Netherlands Gaming Authority is helping them to judge whether it's an illegal or an illegal website, and the Netherlands Gaming Authority is helping them to take their own responsibility. If a consumer willingly and knowingly wants to play illegal, well, there's nothing we can do about it, it's the internet. But they have to know that there's also a legal choice, which is land-based at the moment, so we're all hoping for this milestone of the new bill. That's what it is.
Thank you. Maybe last question before lunch. Sorry.
Thank you. Just, I fully understand what you're saying about cowboys operating in the industry and how you would want to clamp down on those. If there's an area where operators are trying to comply and they might fall short of that, that may be with regards to the way they are being marketed by affiliates, or perhaps the rules relating to payment processes. why wouldn't the gaming authority take a route of sending warning letters of cease and desist to those sorts of operators to give them a chance to comply, rather than what I understand is a new approach, which is just directly fining operators without that warning?
What was your question exactly? I'm sorry.
If there were operators that were falling foul of some of the criteria, maybe even accidentally, it could happen because of what affiliates are doing, or maybe using the wrong sort of payment processes. Would that not be a situation where you'd rather send operators a warning or a cease and desist, rather than directly fining them without that initial process?
Yeah. Well, that is a normal step one takes when a situation is new. So we've done that for over 4.5 years, giving warning letters. But we signaled in December that it's well known to everybody in the industry that it's illegal to target Dutch consumers. So we're past that period of giving warning letters. And I hate it when I drive just 10 kilometers too fast, that I don't get a warning, but I have to pay the fine immediately. Well, I knew, of course, that the law was the law, so it's like that. At one stage, one knows.
Thank you, Marja. We had the last question here.
Yeah, Marja Robichon again. Maybe we have another elephant in the room. I haven't heard anything about channelization yet. How does the policy and what's happening currently translate to channelization objectives?
Well, there is no channelization objective at this moment currently going on for the remote gambling part of the market, of course.
Well, we have a channelization objective that is to be assured if licensing process starts next year, by next year. So I think what we in here now also translates to that.
Yeah. Well, I've expressed my worries here on the stages of the gaming industry events earlier, and also on other events, about the channelization. And my worries are there because of all the fees and taxes which are in the plans in the bill. My worries are there because of all the obligations the licensees have to fulfill. And we learned from other countries that especially those two things determine the channelization. So I'm not without worry about the channelization that we will realize. But on the other hand, I know that the industry is innovative, and I know that evaluations are already announced and addressed in discussions in Parliament. So like in France, like in Spain, things can develop. And so I've got good hopes for the channelization. And with regards to our enforcement policy, well, the future will tell if that will affect the channelization also. But I see in other countries that there are online operators with different brands than who target the Dutch consumers now. And I see those online operators who are big in other countries also interested in the Netherlands. So I see that market shares differs from jurisdictions to jurisdiction. And there are so many companies interested in entering the Netherlands that some of them will be big, and they will create the channelization we need.
So currently the channelization is not part of the enforcement policy. That's what you're saying, more or less.
Now what I'm saying is that there are some parties big in attracting Dutch consumers at this moment. And if you ask me, I've got an economic background. There is no reason to expect that those parties will also be big after the law is in force. It's an innovative sectors. We see different market shares in different jurisdictions. So I've got no worry that there will always be enough companies with a license after the law has come in force to create a good channelization.
Rutger Jan Hebben, speelverantwoord. Talking about channelization, I mean, channelization was the key objective behind setting the priority criteria 5 years ago in the beginning, because there is already an existing market. We acknowledge that the ministry, the regulator, the industry, that there is a current market of about 1 million players. And with the eye on future channeling, we would like to have these players in the regulated alternative as soon as the licenses were there. What's happening now is that the basically for the player, it's getting less and less attractive to enter that Dutch market. You also acknowledge the fact of the tax. We have seen the presentation of Dennis and Frans on the secondary legislation, which seems to be very detailed also. So that all affects the attractiveness of the game. How do you see, given all that, to get these players back that are now forced to leave the Dutch markets? I'm not talking about the operators, I'm talking about the players. They're forced to leave the Dutch market, start playing elsewhere, those 1 million people. How do you try to how do you see them to get back with an offering which is not attractive as soon as the regulation is there?
Yeah. We've done research on consumer behavior, and I'm sure that every operator in the room has done similar research on what is the consumer behavior, and everybody who's done such a research knows two things are most obvious for the consumer behavior. First is that they've got a big favor to play at a legal setting. And second is they play at several operators at the same time, sometimes, often also both land-based and remote, and they change operators not all the time, but gradually. So that's no static market, and that answers your question.
No, that doesn't answer my question, because these 1 million people are already gone, and you're not getting them back. Because there's also research showing that the key element for a player to join a market is attractiveness and payouts ratios, etc. And being sure that he gets his money when he wants to withdraw. I mean, how do you see to get those people back? These are the 1 million players that are already playing online.
Yeah. Well, I think I've said everything about that, because I'm not worried. I'm not without worry about the channelization because of the reason you just mentioned. But there are elements on itself. What is the payout ratio? How attractive can the offer be with regard to all the requirements that are needed from them? And apart from them, we see that consumers hop from one operator to another operator, to a legal operator if possible.
Great. Thank you. I think there's one last question here before two last questions. You had one question? No? No, sorry. Then last question.
Marja, it's not a question, it's an observation. I think what you're saying is defeated by market reality, which is Dutch players have sort of a, well, I'm not going to say legal alternative, but there is, of course, e-commerce offering in the Netherlands, whereas almost 1 million players in the Netherlands choose to play with highly regulated operators from across Europe who have, as you know, in some cases 7, 8, 9 or 10 licenses from other regulators. So these consumers trust the offering of that particular operator, and rightly so, I would say. So market reality is they have a sort of an alternative through the e-commerce route in the Netherlands. Nevertheless, they choose to play with, you know, the larger operators who have a better product offering. So don't you think that conflicts with the sort of research the Gaming Authority has commissioned?
So what is your question to me?
No, it wasn't a question, as I said. It's a remark. I truly do not believe that consumers will return to the regulated market once a particular operator gets a license. I mean, just say operator X, who has 10 licenses in various member states. The consumer frankly, isn't interested whether or not there is a license issued, I think, in the Netherlands, an additional license, you should say. Yeah. They're interested in the product offering. They're interested in, the attractiveness of the product. They don't particularly care about, a license or not. Why otherwise are there a million Dutch nationals participating?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's your observation. I wish that we could say what the future will be, but of course the future is hard to predict, and we will have to wait what happens. Yeah. Yes. I'm as anxious as you are, I guess. No, not anxious. I'm just as curious as you are. That's what I meant to say.
Marja, I wonder if I could use my chairman's prerogative and ask you another question. The KSA has already guided that it would consider license denial to any operator it considered to be non-compliant with this spirit of the law. And you've also just said that you've gone beyond the point of cease and desist letters. So how close are you to triggering the nuclear option of denying an operator a license?
Yeah, the motie bouwmeester. Yeah. And we're, how should I say it in English? We're just as you read with an vergrootglas, I'm sorry, what the ministry says about that. It's the ministry who makes the policy, how to deal with this demand from the parliament. And what they said now is, and they've confirmed it, that once an operator is fined because of the priority criteria, he is not able to get a license. And the ministry also adds that there's room for maneuver for the gaming authority to judge the trustworthiness of the operator. So we will look at those two criteria, and it will be a case-by-case judgment.
Thank you. Thanks.
And a good listener heard us saying we've not changed the priority criteria. We've just taken the next step. Did you hear me saying that in my presentation?
Marja, I wonder if I think we've reached the end of the allotted time and we're ready for lunch. But thank you so much for the presentation. I think everyone in the audience should warmly congratulate Marja.